Afternoon. We're back in session, and I'll turn to Ms. Amy White, Chair of the Education, Innovation, and Charter Schools Committee. Ms. White.
Thank you, Chair Davis. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for rejoining us this afternoon for the discussion for all of the items on the Education, Innovation, and Charter School Committee. Ms. Jill Kamnitz and I have the pleasure of leading that committee, and we have a very aggressive agenda this afternoon. So we ask that you bear with us, and we'll start off with EICS 1, which is an action on first read. This is the Essie May Kaiser Fox Charter School Review Panel decision. Board members had the opportunity to hear the response to a 3-panel review committee, including Mr. Wendell Hall and Ms. Lynn Kroger and myself, who had the opportunity to sit down and review the decision made by first the Charter School Advisory Board and then the State Board with a revocation for Essie May Kaiser Fox. Essie May Kaiser Fox appealed that decision, and the review panel walked through the steps and the processes. They heard from both Essie May Kaiser Fox and from staff at DPI. The decision that was rendered by the review panel was that the panel upheld the recommendation from the State Board to revoke the charter of Essie May Kaiser Fox. So we put that before the State Board again today as an action on first read. Moving on to action, EICS 2 is a report to the JELOC students in career and college promise, and Ms. Neha Shah Coltrane did an amazing job, and we had some incredible presenters last month. Were there any additional questions from that report that you'd like to have addressed today? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. That'll be before you tomorrow for action. EICS 3 is the renewal recommendations for charters who have an expiration date of 2021. And there were an entire list. I'd like to go through those if you would, and to better truncate the discussion, if there is any today, I will ask, there are several schools recommended for a 10-year charter renewal. Those schools are Global Scholars Academy, Healthy Start Academy, Mallard Creek STEM Academy, Matthews Charter, Peak Charter, Pine Springs Prep, the Hallbridge School, and Union Preparatory Academy at Indian Trail. Do any board members have a question about the 10-year renewal for those schools? Mr. Duncan. Again, and forgive me for not introducing today. I believe we have Ms. Cheryl Turner and Dave Machado willing to answer questions. So, Mr. Duncan, Chair Duncan, Vice Chair Duncan.
Thank you. As I'm reading the 10-year guidelines, it's the academic outcomes have been comparable to the local school administrative unit in the immediately preceding 3 years, or have exceeded growth in the last 3 years. And when I look at the Hallbridge School 10-year recommendation, it has not met growth over the last 4 years. It has exceeded the county performance each of those years. So I guess I would need to have a little more insight as to why the recommendation would be for 10 years in light of the fact that it has exceeded the county, but it has not met growth a single one of those years in the previous 4.
My understanding is that it's an either or, and so they exceeded the county, and so they met that requirement because it was an either or.
Yeah, I see that, but I take it, and thank you for that that comment. Do we? First of all, I guess I needed to talk about I need a better understanding of the guidelines that occurred to me after our last meeting. Are the guidelines board policy? Are they statutory, or are they some policy formed or guidelines formed group or what?
The 10-year is statutory, and the others are guidelines that that the CSAP has put together. But the 10-year one is statutory.
And Ms. Turner, thank you very much for your help here. The statutory being the 3 years performance better than the local school administrative unit and or the 3 years of exceeding growth. That's the
Yes.
statutory.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Well, I will move on from Aubrey School. I do have concerns about not having met growth over a 4-year period and given a 10-year renewal.
But outpacing the local LEA for the past.
Yes, it has done that. And I'm not saying it's not doing a lot of good things. I'm not saying I wouldn't vote to renew. 10 years is my holdup.
Yes, sir.
Mallard Creek STEM has not met the last 3 years on growth either. And on one of the years, it did not outpace the county. And so I know the answer to that one is that there's a 5% allowance. Where does that come from? That's my next question, just so I can understand, not ask these questions again at other times. Is that a CSAB rule? Is that a board policy? Or is that a statute?
CSAB defined comparability as within 5 percentage points.
All right, so CSAB is defining it that way for purposes of making their recommendations.
That's correct.
All right, well, those are the two I just want to ask those questions about.
Okay. Any other questions about any other schools on the 10-year list? Okay. The one school that has been recommended for a 7-year renewal is Central Wake High School. Are there questions about renewal for Central Wake? Okay. Hearing none, I'll read out the list for the 5-year renewals. They are Coastal Prep Academy, Concord Lakes Academy, Fernleaf Community Charter School, Gate City Charter School, Girls Leadership Academy of Wilmington, Iredell Charter Academy, Success Institute, Union Day School, and Unity Classical Charter. Board members, let me switch frames here for a second. I know that there were some questions at the last board meeting about the movement to allow several schools that should or would fall within the 3-year renewal, but giving them an opportunity for the 5-year renewal and the reasoning behind that. And we spoke to that. Dave Machado spoke to that, as did Alex Quigley. Are there questions about the 5 schools or any of the schools for the 5-year renewal? Ms. Candace.
It's not really a question. It's just more of an ongoing concern with several of these in the giving them the 5 more years. It just seems that 3 would be more appropriate. Low, Iredell, Fernleaf, particularly. Giving me pause. Union Day, Concord Lake. I'm just not seeing a lot that gives me faith that that those schools are doing what they need to be doing with their students.
Ms. White, this is Dave Machado. May I address that?
Please, sir.
Okay. For the schools that we have mentioned, that you just mentioned, Ms. Campbell, none of the schools have any kind of governance or financial non-compliant. They have clean audits, and Fernleaf is a C school. The other ones are D schools. If I can talk about GLOW for just a minute, they're in Coastal Prep. They are both in New Hanover County. Over the last 4 years, they've endured 2 major hurricanes and a pandemic. So we felt like we wanted to certainly hold them harmless for things I have no control over. Both of those schools, we were very impressed with their leader, with their school improvement plan, and we're comfortable giving them recommended to CSAB, who's comfortable recommending to you for a 5-year. And I do want to stress that these schools that would have gotten a 3 will be on what we call accelerated monitoring, where they will get site visits. If we can't go in person, we'll do it virtual. They will have to come before a charter school advisory board to explain their progress. And we do keep a very close eye on them, as we do the 5 years also. So just because you're getting a 5 does not mean we will not look at their data for another 5 years. Thank you.
Mr. Machado, I'll add to that, for those schools that would have been given a 3, that it would, because of the renewal process is a 2-year process, it would start the entire process over again in 12 months, when schools probably should be focusing on student achievement as opposed to preparing additional paperwork. And is it not also true that any of the schools that would fall into the low performing category would receive additional scrutiny and would be required to appear before CSAB for a full accounting of performance?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. They will appear before CSAB every year. They must, if they're low performing, they must also put their school improvement plan into NC STAR. And then our risk assessment team has a process that we look at their data also. So we keep a pretty close eye on those schools.
Miss White, this is Olivia.
Yes, ma'am, Dr. Oxendine.
I want to make sure that my comment is also kind of a question mark in my voice as well. I believe that there is a tool that is utilized by CSAB known as the performance framework that, based on my understanding of that framework, it's very rigorous and probably should be more widely used, maybe even outside the charter school purpose. But because we are drawing so much attention to some of these schools in the 3-year category right here in the state board meeting, I would think that this is calling additional attention to CSAB to pay close attention to that performance framework relative to these schools that are being questioned. Is that correct? Am I correct or incorrect?
Yes, Dr. Oxendine, you are correct. And we will be providing you the information for the performance framework when we present you the annual report also. We've combined them this year, so you will be seeing that in several months. But all of our schools are monitored by the performance framework, which monitors academic, financial, and governance compliance.
All right, thank you, Ms. White, and Mr. Machado, definitely.
Okay, I saw Ms. Camden, then Superintendent Truitt, and then Vice Chair Duncan.
Thank you, Chair White. It's very interesting to look at the spreadsheet and see these school report card grades, and I just can't let it go without saying that this is exactly why we need to revise our school accountability system, because these grades mean nothing. I understand having concerns, but I could look at the A and also say, well, what does that mean? So that's just my shameless plug for revising our school accountability system. Thank you.
I'll insert and then turn to Vice Chair Duncan. As I looked at traditional public schools in the county in which I reside, in my own community, 8 out of 9 public elementary schools in my community have a C or a D, with no additional scrutiny, with no report due to the local LEA. And so just want to bring that as an additional measure of information. Vice Chair Duncan, for your question.
Thank you for both those comments, and and I agree with them both. The grade does not drive my thoughts about this, but whether or not you met growth means a lot to me in terms of growth, and that would be my focal point here. And we are passing, well, I just pointed out one that hadn't met growth in 4 years, and we're talking about a 10-year renewal. I'm looking at the 3-year renewal guidelines that I believe are provided by CSAB in there. I do want to compliment CSAB for the work they do. They work very hard. And they spend a lot of time doing these reviews and many other tasks. So I do want to stop and say thank you for all the work that's being done there. And I want to further preface this comment by saying, I understand there's been hurricanes and I understand that we've had a pandemic. And so I do believe that these schools deserve additional chance because of the various interferences they've had and disruption in the life of the schools over the course of the past few years. My questions and comments on all of these have to do with the length. As I look at Fernleaf, Girls Leadership Academy, and Coastal Preparatory Academy, none of them meet the standard for a 3-year renewal. Not even talking about a 5-year renewal standard, the 3-year renewal, and that's even taking into account the 5% within the 5% guideline that has been established. And so I want to give them a chance, but I just hesitate to give 5 years when they haven't met the 3-year renewal. That's my holdup. That's my concern. I think they fully deserve a chance to go forward in a renewal, and I appreciate the fact that Mr. Machado and his office, who always do an excellent job, will monitor these schools carefully with whatever we give them. But yeah, I think the guidelines are extremely reasonable, and I just the thing that gives us all pause is the schools are operating in a really difficult environment over the past several years, and they should not be held at fault for that. As we should note for our public that all of our traditional public schools have also dealt in tremendous hardship over the course of the past several years and should also be given some grace with respect to the difficult work and challenges that have been there. And I believe these schools fully deserve that same grace. But I'm not sure about the length. That's my concern, just to state it the best way I know how.
Mr. Machado or Ms. Turner, would you like to speak to Vice Chair Duncan's comment about the meeting the threshold for the 3-year? I believe there's a language that addresses that.
Yes, Ms. Hoy, we also have Dr. Cooper on the call that she leads the renewal process, and she's available to answer that question also. Dr. Cooper?
Yes, thank you for your time. Just to kind of explain the process of the 2-year renewal, the 2-year renewal process. So any school that receives a 3-year expire in 2024, which means they will re-enter the renewal process July of 2022. So while you will have this year's data, next year's data, and October of the following year, the 24-25 school year data, it really comes down to the reliability of what's going to be there for this year. And so we wanted to just give you a window of at least 3 years post-pandemic without a break, without those schools coming before you again, showing you the same amount of data that you're basically looking at right now. So just to explain that, so July they'll start. They come before Charter School Advisory Board again in October of 2023. Does that help to explain the timeline a little bit?
I appreciate the explanation, and I understand the timeline. So yes, you've helped explain some things well. I'm not sure that those remove all my concerns, however.
Yes, sir, I understand. Do you have any additional questions for me regarding the renewal process or timeline regarding this renewal cohort?
I would only express thanks for all the work that you've been doing and others have been doing on this, because I know it's a ton of work.
Well, thank you, sir.
And I would also like to add, Mr. Duncan, if you don't mind, that any of these schools we can bring back in front of CSAB and the State Board of Ed to scrutinize their data, shorten that renewal cycle. Again, I want to emphasize we're not going to, next time we talk about these schools will be 5 years from now. We are going to aggressively monitor them every year, and CSAB will see them before them sometime next year, the following year also.
Ms. Kamenetz.
So just to follow up on that, might we then ask for a year from now or at some point, particularly, taking that group of schools that normally would have gotten a 3-year renewal that are getting a 5-year renewal, if we could sort of put them on a list and perhaps come back at some period of time and do an update on how those schools are doing when we've got some data to look at would be helpful. Another question that I have, Mr. Machado, you might be able to answer this off the top of your head, but I'll be impressed if you can. I know that some of these schools that we're talking about, it is their first 3 years as an operating charter. Are there any of them who have been in operation long enough that there is a pattern of just continual 3-year renewals?
Mr. Machado, would you like me to assist with that?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Cooper.
You're welcome. So of the schools that we've recommended for 5 years, there's only one of those schools, Success Institute, that is now coming off of a 3-year charter. All the remaining schools are on their first 5-year charter agreement.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other additional questions for this discussion today? Okay, not hearing or seeing any. Dr. Cooper, thank you so much for the additional information that you provided, and a special thanks to Dave Machado and his team and Cheryl Turner from CSAB for being available for the discussion today. We'll close that out and move to EICS. I believe we're on 4 now, which was the report to the General Assembly on the virtual charter schools. Colleagues, you heard that report last time, and we had a great discussion. Is there any note of interest or particular comment any board member wants to make about this item? Okay. I'm doing my job. I just want you guys to know that Mr. Davis challenged me to expeditiously move through our agenda. We're on EICS 5, where this is our 2021-22 charter school enrollment expansion requests. We also had a very robust discussion about these 3 schools who are seeking for a number of different reasons to expand. They must be receive approval from the state board if they exceed the 30% maximum allowable increase. The first school is Shining Rock Classical Academy. The second school is Moore Montessori Community School. And the third is Unity Classical Charter School. Any board member have a question about any of those 3 schools? Some of them are, 2 of them are expanding into high school. One of them is changing facilities. All gave reasonable explanations for the expansion request. Questions from board members? Okay, not seeing any for that. EICS 6 is North Raleigh Charter School's second delay request. Anybody have a question about that request? We heard the reasoning behind that. They were renting from a church property, but planning to rent from a church property, but COVID hit and the church has shut down, and so they've had to put a delay on their facility. Questions about North Raleigh Charter Schools delay request? Okay, that leaves us with EICS 7, Triangle Math and Science High School's request to relocate. Triangle Math and Science currently resides in Wake County, and they are moving because they have secured facility space. Questions about Triangle Math and Science Academy High School's request to relocate? Mr. Duncan, question, Mr. Duncan.
I just wanted to, I know the board considered a number of items in making this decision, and there was a letter that was, I believe, pertaining to this sent by the Wake County Board, and I just wanted to hear what the consideration and response was to that letter, just to be respectful of the fact that somebody did enter a concern or express a concern.
Yes. Hi. Good afternoon, state board members. I think so. with TMSA, the sentiment among the board is what you have is a highly performing charter school that has been successful for many years in the state and is replicating, which is something, frankly, that we don't see enough of and we want to see more of, which is our best, highest performing charter schools growing and replicating. And I think that the benefit of that is that they have a proven model. We're not getting an application here that, or a situation where someone is reinventing the wheel. They have a proven model that they're running. This added component to this is, in what we've seen across the state with schools that are doing this, is the inclusion of the weighted lottery, transportation, and free lunch, which we have pressed through the Access Grant and in all of our communication to boards that come before us, that if you're going to do this and you're going to ask us to make a recommendation on your behalf for the State Board of Education, we need to see a priority on equity. And that's something that's included in this request. And I think we want to certainly see TMSA increase the number of socioeconomically disadvantaged students that attend that school, and think that their expansion and desire to relocate will be beneficial to that end.
Thank you.
Okay. And I believe for just point of clarification, and I could be incorrect, but the letter that was written, so Triangle Math and Science High School is seeking to relocate. There is another Triangle Math and Science in the next discussion item, and they're going to replicate. So I think the letter that we received was directly related to the replication, not the relocation. So just not to confuse the matters.
And they did sort of get confused in the materials, and so I thought it would be wise to just get a response to it. And I appreciate Mr. Quigley's response.
Well, and I'll just say, Ms. White, they are interconnected, right? So it's kind of a relocation and expansion. All of these pieces are kind of working together. And again, happy that it's happening, because we're going to see a equity increase in terms of priority at this school, as well as a school that is doing innovative and exceptional things, particularly in the area of science and math in our state, grow and expand its impact.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. Further questions? Fantastic. Mr. Quigley, thank you too for being available on the call today. Let's move, that closes out our action items for this month. We'll move to discussion. So these items we'll discuss this month, and it'll be back before you for a vote next month. EICS 8 is the 2020 Charter School Advisory Board Charter School application recommendations. Board members, on the executive summary, you will see that there were 21 applications up for discussion. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 who have been recommended for approval, but not to provide a lack of discussion around the schools that were not recommended for approval. I'd like to ask, is there any school on the list that has not been recommended for approval that any board member would like to ask a question about?
Madam Chair, this is James Ford.
Yes, sir, Mr. Ford.
So forgive me, this is not an exact request. I'm going to ask about a couple of schools, and really it was just noticing the split nature of a few votes. And so I guess from scanning, it's Beam Academy, Impact Leadership Academy, and I think a couple more, New Haven. Yeah, just could you provide just really quickly a flavor for why those particular votes were as close and as contested as they were? What was kind of the nature for the three of those, why they didn't get referred?
Yes, I can. I will say I'm more prepared for the ones we recommended for approval, but I would say if I could characterize the split votes related to schools that are that were not moved forward, I think, and I think that what I impress upon the board is that we need to, particularly in the context of the pandemic, that we need to be rigorous in our process and only bring you applications that we believe without question and with a strong majority or ideally unanimous are ready to enter the ready to open process in a what still will be a challenging year, and enter the education field in a year when we have the impact of COVID still as a residual impact. I think some board members generally want to lean towards, okay, let's give this group seems strong, let's give them an opportunity. It seems that in those situations, the majority of the board lean towards, if I don't feel 100% strong about it, I'm going to err on the side of no. And I think given that, that's why you see 21 applications, only 5 schools that have been moved forward. And I'll defer as well to Cheryl Turner, Vice Chair Turner, and Dave if they wanted to add any additional comments.
What, I'm sorry, was Mr. Machado, were you getting ready to speak?
No, I was just gonna, excuse me, Mr. Ford, I just gonna say Alex articulated that perfect. I can't top that.
No, that's actually an encouraging reason to hear. And so thank you, Alex, Mr. Machado, and Vice Chair Turner as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Any other questions about those which are on the do not approve list? Let's shift our focus then to the 5 that are before us for approval. I just want to highlight briefly some of the things out of the applications for all 5, and then I'll give you a chance to ask particular questions if you so desire. So Central Carolina Academy is proposed to be in Lee County. It's a school that would serve grades 6 through 12. Lee County is exploding. It's replicating. It would be a replication of Chatham Charter School. It's a very diverse student population target. Has a strong program for students with disabilities. It is planning to apply for the NC Access Grant. It is a much smaller school environment than the 2 high schools and the middle schools, so much more individualized attention, and it's one school that what sets it apart is that it's one school instead of feeder schools. So when you have 6 to 12 all in one school environment, teachers, administrators, and support staff can focus on the students as they move from each grade instead of having to worry about that transition from middle to high school. Triangle Math and Science Academy is proposed to be in Wake County. It's start as K-5 and expand to K-8, but only 600 in the first year. It's a replication school as well. This is the school that we received the letter and the impact statement regarding issues in Wake County. It is, there's 2,178 students on the waiting list for the current school. And so high demand for that, and it has met every growth. The previous school that it's going to replicate has met growth every year of its existence. Shifting to Bonnie Cone. So there, you might already be aware that there's a Bonnie Cone Classical Academy, and this is Bonnie Cone Leadership Academy, which would be a feeder school for Bonnie Cone Classical in the Huntersville area, which is also high growth. It is a highly successful EMO operator that has schools in Arizona, Florida, and in North Carolina. It has a strong track record for serving students with that are EDS, schools that are predominantly EDS and still making school performance grades of A and B. American Leadership Academy is proposed to be in Johnston County. There are 5,000 new rooftops proposed or approved within a 15-mile radius of where the school would like to locate. They're hoping to work out an articulation agreement between the one charter school that's existed that exist in the area to provide a high school option. Again, it has repeated success from all of the other schools, the same operator as EMO operator as proposed for Bonnie Cone. And then the last highlight is Dogwood Classical Academy, which is proposed to open as a K-5. And its curriculum is a little bit different because it is a very classical approach to education, focusing on a great books curriculum. And it will align to the Cabarrus County demographics. And in the area, the schools around the area from which it is hoping to locate all have letter grades of A and B. So I'll turn to you, board members, now after highlighting those things from those particular applications to ask if anyone has a question about Central Carolina Academy for our presenters today. I believe we have probably Mr. Dave Machado, Mr. Alex Quigley, and Vice Chair Cheryl Turner is probably still on the call. The questions about Central Carolina?
Madam Chair.
Listen.
This is Tony Jackson.
Yes, sir.
It's not a question about the specific school. I think it's a question in general. Is this the appropriate time?
Well, I'll tell you what, is it specific about approvals or is it about,
I think just about process and it can be until the end if that's appropriate. I just don't want to, if you're going to go each individual school, this would apply to all of them.
well, go ahead and ask the question then.
So my question is, and I would say this, I want to start from the context that charter schools are laboratory schools that are designed to help us identify best practice. And I hope that we would agree on that as the context. I guess my question is, as you talk about replication being the gold standard, is there any requirement that the charter, as they look to replicate, that they at least enter into a conversation with the LEA about replicating within the district, as opposed to just starting fresh again, where maybe you've learned and then we're then living out the true intent of charters to grow innovation and then bring that back to the local communities or expand within the LEA. That's just I guess an operational question. Is that happening anywhere, or is the intent now to branch out from charter to charter only? Or are there conversations around branching in with the LEA to maybe replicate a model that we have seen is successful? And if it's successful for one group of kids, it more than likely will be successful for all. That's my question. I don't know if this is the time to address that or not, or if there's even an answer. I'm just interested in hearing that perspective.
I'd be happy to respond. I think it's a great question and a great idea, quite frankly. And that is absolutely one of the intents of charter schools. I think there's, as outlined in legislation, there's a variety of purposes: improving student learning, increasing opportunities for all students, new professional development, expanded choices for parents, all of which can be done via the charter school model or through collaboration. And I think many of us in the sector would like to see more collaboration with districts. I can certainly name myself as one of those people. And I can say on a personal example, as my school that I previously ran, Maureen Joy Charter School, was expanding, I took a trip with the superintendent of Durham Public Schools to Washington, D.C. to observe a charter model together with him side by side, so that we could then potentially come back and rather than kind of exactly as you're saying, rather than just growing my school larger, how could we potentially take some of those ideas and integrate them into the existing school system at the time? That superintendent later transitioned on, so it kind of part of that was based on the individuals, so that didn't gain ground. There have been some good work on the ground level with this. So when we talk about schools that have a network, Movement Schools in Charlotte, which is a relatively new school that was modeled after Vice Chair Turner's school originally, Sugar Creek, and now has two campuses and is adding a third eventually. They partnered with Charlotte Mech and some schools surrounding them on a joint parent engagement system where the elementary school right around the corner, public school and movement school, both use the exact same model, same system, same program for the teacher and for the parents, and worked with a group called Shermco that has done some consulting work with Charlotte Mech, and it was a huge success. And we had the head of that company come and present to us, and so I think those success stories are starting to happen on the ground, and I think we need encouragement, probably funding and some other things to make more of that collaboration work happen. I also don't think that should be, we want to limit or restrict the expansion of excellence as only going through a traditional school district model. I think it's a both and. I think we should do both.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley, for that answer. So let's turn back to Central Carolina Academy then. Are there questions about Central Carolina Academy charter, that application? Okay, seeing none. Triangle Math and Science Academy. Bonnie Cone Leadership Academy. The American Leadership Academy. Dogwood Classical Academy. Ms. Kamnitz.
I have to ask for the C that there were 2 opposed in the vote, and I think that maybe both, or at least one of them is on the call right now. So I would like to hear from them what their concerns were.
Yes, I did vote against the school. I think that I would say again, I approached all of the applications this year, I think with an extra level of rigor and over previous years, given the context in which I think students are going to be coming into these schools, regardless of the fact that they still have a year before they open. I found in the review of the application, the conversation with the board, I like the classical model, and I actually really like the idea they are partnering with Hillsdale College, which has a whole program and a network of schools that are, and I'll get into that in a sec, but I felt like the classical model needed to be further extrapolated in the application, and I felt like the board could have been more prepared to answer the questions. And so again, I think when I approached these applications this year, if I was on the fence, I personally fell into the no column. And so I would say I held an extremely high bar this year, as you can see, given the vote, slightly different than the rest of the board on this one. I will say that given the context, given the fact that it did move forward, and what I've done since is I've done some research on the network. Since I had more time to do that, I have found multiple schools that have been supported by this model that are serving low-income children, and predominantly some schools that are predominantly low income using this model. One of them is in Atlanta that have been effective with students, well supported by the network. And I will say that I feel confident that the board can, with the support of this network, that gave me a lot more confidence to see that in action. I spent time on their websites, kind of went deep on it. And I feel better. I feel much better about the application now. And also, I think that, given the support that they have, the network of schools that are getting this done with kids who come from low-income backgrounds, I feel better about this group kind of tightening up the aspects that need to be tightened up in the ready to open process. So happy to enthusiastically recommend them for approval.
Thank you. Is Ms. Turner still on the call?
Yes, I am. My concern was the same as Alex's at the time. I I wasn't as confident about the board as I was about the organization that was supporting them. And I feel strongly that we issue charters to boards. We don't issue charters to outside organizations. And so I wasn't feeling as confident about the board. I do agree with Alex. I think the model is different than what we have available in most places. I think that it's definitely worth trying in North Carolina. This particular group that is supporting them has been successful with all kinds of children in all kinds of places. And I feel like they will support them through this. And so I was comfortable with the group's decision to send it forward.
Thank you.
But I'll just jump in with a question as well. Vice Chair Turner and Chair Quigley, can you just briefly articulate for board members and those listening the hoops that the requirements that a school must follow in order to be ready to open, and the additional scrutiny that you can provide during this next year as they put all of their ducks in a row, getting ready to actually open a school, and the opportunities that you'll have to further delve into whether or not there is true readiness.
Well, I was under the impression you wanted to keep this meeting on time. But I will defer to Dave for the quick synopsis. It's a long list. It is a long list.
Okay, yeah, Ms. White, this is Dave Machado again. We have a series of, I think it's 5 or 6, what we call ready to open sessions. We used to do them obviously face-to-face, where the boards and the school leader, if it had been identified by that time, would come to Raleigh, and we would go everything from A to Z on running a charter school. This year, we were able to do it very successfully virtually, but each month there's a session on a particular topic. Could be serving all children, making sure that they understand the responsibilities for teaching students with disability. It could be the financing of the school. Alexis Schaus and her team discuss the budgets of the school. They discuss cash management, how they're going to be funded. Then we also, at every one of the meetings, we close with what we call expert on the ground, where we bring in a charter leader that has gone through the RTO process recently and ask them to share what they face, maybe some of their pitfalls, what they recommend. And we always have Alex Quigley come in and talk about how to recruit students and those sort of things. So it is a very robust training. I think all the boards that go to it come out of there knowing a lot more about charter operations, and it's mandatory that a board member attend, and it's also mandatory if they've identified a leader that they will attend also.
Thank you, Mr. Machado, for that overview. So board members not seeing any additional hands raised or anyone that has a pressing question, we'll close out the discussion on the application recommendations. I'll encourage you, the applications are embedded on the executive summary. If you have not had a chance to look over those, you feel free to do so. Those will be back before us for action next month. EICS 9 is a request from Kestrel Heights to amend its mission, lunch program, and transportation plans. And I believe that Mr. Dave Machado is going to walk us through this.
Yes, Ms. White. Kestrel Heights has gone through strategic planning over the last several years. They are a school that's in Durham County. It's one of our older schools. They were opened in 1998. It is currently a K-8 school with 435 students. It's a C school, and it has met growth. They've changed their mission statement to reflect the type of school that they want to be in the future. They had come to us earlier with a mission statement, and after discussion with the EICS committee, it was recommended they come back with a little clearer mission statement. So we're very pleased with what they came back with. They are going to participate in the National School Lunch Program. They currently are providing free and reduced lunch for their students, but they want to do it through the federal lunch program so they can better serve those students. And it has become very obvious during this pandemic that if our schools are not participating in the National Lunch Program, we're not able to provide those students with services outside of the school. So we're very happy that they've made this decision. They have also added $81,000 into their budget to fund personnel and upfits to their cafeteria. Transportation, they surveyed the students that were leaving the school and asked them, why are you leaving? And one of the big reasons was, well, you're not providing transportation and I cannot get my students to your school. So they have decided that they will provide transportation starting next year. They don't know if they will do it in-house or they will contract a person. They're vetting that right now. And they have added $142,000 in their budget to support transportation. So again, this school is not part of the NC Access program. We're very pleased that they have looked internally and how they can better serve their population, and really pleased that they have come with these 3 requests.
Thank you, Mr. Machado. Questions or comments from board members? Yes, Superintendent Truitt.
Thank you, Chair White. So in the previous mission statement versus the new mission statement, are we to assume that they have decided that they are not a Padilla school anymore?
Mr. Machado, did you hear that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was muted. Superintendent Troy, can you ask me that question again?
Yes, in Kestrel Heights new mission, there is no mention of a curriculum in accordance with Padilla. And so I'm wondering if they have decided to abandon the Padilla approach, or if they are just not including it in their new mission statement.
I can't give you that answer. I don't know. I can find out. I'm under the impression that they're moving away from that curriculum, but I will certainly find out by our next meeting to be able to answer it for you.
Yes, I'd like to know if they're replacing it with something else, or holding on to the Padilla approach.
Yes, I'll get that information for you.
Thank you.
Other questions?
This is Olivia, Ms. Chair White. Olivia has a question.
Yes, Dr. Oxendine.
Just to tag on to Superintendent Truitt's point about the mission statement and the going away. It sounds as though stepping away from Padilla. Mr. Machado, if that be the case, once you investigate and you find that they are, the school is transitioning to a different curriculum, would that necessitate any other changes in the charter?
Yes, Dr. Oxendine, that would require an amendment request, a curriculum amendment request, and our office is allowed to approve that. And I will certainly keep the state board abreast of whether that is the case.
Because that would be, in my mind, that would be a substantial revision.
Yes, it sure would.
Thank you to both of you. Thank you.
Mr. Machado, if we can make that a formal inquiry, if you can provide that information at the next board meeting. One of the things, the loss of being virtual is when you see acknowledgement and head shaking at the table that there are others that also would like to know the answer to that question. So thank you for in advance for working in advance to get us that question answered.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Perfect. Okay. Questions anymore about Kestrel? Okay, great. Let's move to EICS 10, and this is Wilmington School of the Arts request to revise the grades that they serve. Mr. Machado.
Okay. This school is in New Hanover County. It's in its first year of operation, and it's a K-2 school with 153 students. Their charter allows them to add third grade next year because they can add a grade a year. They want to accelerate that and add also add fourth and fifth grades. They are not asking for an enrollment increase. They are doing this for two reasons. Number one is they have a lot of, they have identified a good number of siblings that would fall in the fourth grade and the fifth grade, so that could add the enrollment to the school. And they've had some trouble meeting their targeted enrollment, and they feel like adding these two grades, they would be able to meet their targeted enrollment.
COVID or anything. Well, it's still something serious. I just monitor things. I'll give you a call later when I get off.
Lieutenant Governor Falwell. So we have someone on the call today who's not muted currently. I think we got it.
And they have the staff and the facility to accommodate this growth. And you can see, we provided the grade levels and the enrollment numbers for you. And again, they want to add fourth and fifth for the next 2 years, next 3 years. Then after that, year 5, if everything goes well, they'll add a 6. If not, they'll stay at K5. And I want to emphasize again, they are not asking for an enrollment increase.
Okay, so questions from board members about this request from Wilmington School to, again, change its grade configuration, but not the number of students that they plan to serve.
I think there aren't any concerns from CSAP about that big jump to adding 3 grades at once. Or we?
Mr. Quigley, are you still on the call?
Yes. I will say that we did have some concerns. We dug in and had a robust discussion. They have a new school leader who our assessment of her was that she's very determined, has experience, came from the traditional public school system, has relationships in the community, and has had numerous conversations with the Office of Charter Schools as she's evaluating the potential risks and benefits of this decision. And based on that, I believe we had 2, well, she presented once, we saw her materials. We felt confident that they have the personnel and they have the plan to execute on this. And when schools, if they feel confident that they can do it, and, again, just given our evaluation, we felt that this would actually, again, would be strategic. So she was able to cite numerous examples of students in the upper grades who they would pull in because of the siblings in the lower grades and things like that. So yes, we did actually dig in quite a bit on this, but left feeling confident about it.
And I may have missed this, but their current enrollment this year is what number?
153.
Sorry, I know that was repetitive. All right, thank you.
Good questions. Any other on Wilmington School of the Arts? All right, well, moving right along. Now we'll hear a presentation for the 2021 charter school application and timeline.
Thank you, Ms. White. As we are giving you our recommendation for the applications, it's time to talk about next year's timeline and rubric. In accordance with General Assembly statute and State Board policy, State Board of Ed has to approve this timeline every year. Just some highlights. We're mirroring this current timeline pretty much to what we're doing right now. The application will open up on the last Friday in May, which is May 28th. It'll close the last Friday in July, which is July 30th. As always, the fast track and accelerated applications will receive priority review. Accelerated applications and fast tracks will be presented to State Board no later than February for discussion, vote in March. And the regular applications will get to State Board of Ed no later than April, discussion and vote in May. This is the same timeline. You can see CSAP worked really hard. Our office worked really hard to try to get these applications in front of you a little earlier than the timeline dictated. So if they are approved, they can start the process of securing financing and locations for their new school. And again, this timeline also allows for, if there's any school that comes before you that you want to send back to CSAB, we do incorporate that in this timeline. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Machado?
If I could just make a comment, Dave.
Sure, Mr. Quigley.
I just want to reiterate that one thing we are going to, I won't be on the board any longer, but we hope that I hope that the CSAB moves forward, the Austin Charter Schools move forward with is shifting the entire application timeline up so that these recommendations could be brought before you as early as January for discussion and action in February. We are experiencing more schools that are not opening on time and running into a variety of challenges. I believe that part of that is it is extremely difficult to open a school that doesn't exist in a year. And particularly if you are not attached to, if it's not a replication and if it's not an EMO or a CMO that's driving the charter application and then doing the legwork to get the school up and open, it is very difficult. So if we could have state board decisions in February, you're essentially giving those schools an extra 4 to 5 to, depending on how early we could make it happen, 6 months runway on top of that, the year-long existing planning year to get their schools open. I think that would be very empowering. And all it requires is shifting the deadline. We all agreed not to make any major changes this year, but I just wanted to preview that and suggest that we consider moving. The applications are going to come whenever we tell them to submit them. So it could be due in January. And particularly if we can make a decision on that, and maybe that's something we can discuss earlier, get it approved for so that we're a year out ahead. And then all the applicants know that, hey, the next deadline, the one after the summer, is actually going to be 6 months later. So I just wanted to share that. And I think it is exceedingly difficult to open a charter school and open a school from scratch. So the more time that we can give schools to do it successfully, I think is a good thing.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. I'll echo your comments and let colleagues know that Ms. Kamnitz and I, along with Mr. Machado, have had significant conversations about getting the ball rolling on putting a proposal together for moving that timeline up to allow charter schools and their boards to work, have an approval earlier to allow them the best chance for success when they open day one. And so mentioning that to you here today out of our committee, we'd like to direct the Charter School Advisory Board to go ahead and develop that new timeline and get that before us as soon as possible so that we can discuss, research any problem areas or celebrate any successes. Mr. Chair?
Yeah, without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, sir. All right, no questions, no further questions on that item?
I don't have a question, but just I picked up out of that comment that Mr. Quigley may be leaving the board shortly.
Ms. Kamnitz and I have had tearful moments over this.
That seemed to be as important as his comments were. That was the big headline out of that remark. I just want to say how much I have appreciated, and I know other people on this board as well, how much I've appreciated his wonderful leadership and his support of the schools throughout the time period that he served on the board. I will feel like it's a real loss to not have his insight available to us for all the work that's gone on at CSAB and in other places for charter schools.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm term limited and my term is up in June, and but it has not been without. I appreciate that, but it's a team effort. It is. I have great board, great just collaboration from Dave and his office. It just and I feel very blessed and honored to have had this opportunity. So thank you, and got a few months left.
Well, again, Mr. Quigley, you can't see board members and the smiles that we see above masks and the clicking of fingers in agreement for Mr. Duncan's comments. And might I also suggest for colleagues that weren't aware, there was a news report, I believe it was on CBS, that highlighted Mr. Quigley and his work at his school over in Durham. And I'll forward that link to you so that you can see it. Mr. Machado also made a cameo appearance on the clip, but it was a great pro charter school piece highlighting good work done. So thanking all board members of CSAB, but Mr. Quigley, since you'll be retiring from service, we thank you in advance. Okay, let's EICS 12. This is our last item for discussion today, and this is United Community School. I'm making the distinction. We have already heard about Unity Classical School and expansion, so this is a completely different school. And the other thing that you need to know about this request appearing before us today is that the request before us has a recommendation that we not approve this high school expansion. Mr. Machado.
Yes, we've had intense conversations with this school. This is a K-8 school in Charlotte, very dynamic young leaders, relatively small, but they're doing a great job. Currently, they are low performing, and after several conversations with the Charter School Advisory Board, they have agreed to not pursue a 9th grade until they get out of the low performing category. So they have voluntarily withdrawn this request.
Excellent news, Mr. Machado. Questions or comments? Okay, that will bring us to the two consent items that we have on today's EICS agenda. One is a Queen City STEM request to implement a weighted lottery. And then the last item is EICS 14, the 2021-2022 residential school calendar, and a request for approval on those calendars. So, Mr. Chair, that concludes the EICS agenda today. Thank you to all of the team that worked together to put together presentation materials for today's committee report.
Thank you, Ms. White. Once again, you've exceeded expectations, getting us back on schedule. Thank you so much. With that, that concludes today's updates and committee reports. We will have the remaining committee reports during tomorrow's board meeting. I'd like to thank our board members, advisors, DPI staff, and others who contributed to today's meeting. However, before we move to closed session, I'd like to return for just a moment to the SLA committee and specifically the presentation around the assessment and accountability waivers, and turn to Ms. Kamnitz for that item.
Thank you, Chair Davis. So if you'll recall, Dr. Howard referred to a request that we authorized a waiver from the state for school performance grades if we receive the waiver approval from the U.S. Department of Education. So I'd like to ask that we authorize such waiver request if that federal waiver comes through.
So that we proceed with requesting a similar waiver from the state requirements.
Yes.
Any questions on that consideration? Okay, hearing none, we'll place this on our action item for tomorrow. Now I ask for a motion to go into closed session, and note for the audience and online listeners that following closed session, the March 3rd, 2021 meeting will adjourn immediately. Doctor, is there a motion to go into closed session?
Yes. Chair
Motion by
Davis.
Vice Chair Duncan. Is there a second?
Perhaps maybe should fully state the motion.
Thank you.
Perhaps.
I'm trying to move at Truett speed, and I'll slow down now and turn it over to you.
I move that we go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, Section 143-318.11 A1, 3, and 6, to prevent the disclosure of information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to NC General Statute, Sections 143-129.AD and 115C-321. To consult with our attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the public body, including specifically to consider the cases of Kirby versus the State Board of Education and Leandro versus the State of North Carolina, and to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, or condition of appointment of a public officer or employee or prospective public officer or employee.
Thank you, Vice Chair Duncan. Is there a second? Second by Ms. White. Dr. Townsend Smith, will you call the roll?
Dr. Oxendine,
Yes.
Ms. Chemnitz.
Yes.
Mr. Keenan, back to you, Mr. Keenan. Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Rogers,
Yes.
Ms. White,
Yes.
Justine,
Yes.
Lieutenant Governor,
Yes.
Vice Chair Duncan.
Yes.
Yeah. Motion carries. Let's be in closed session at 3:10. Take a 10-minute break and be in at 3:10. All right, thank you. Lieutenant Governor?
Yes.
See, I was right.